Okay. I think we're live. Privileged to be here with you. Now, I must say, we've got a ram-packed show today. We come to you live on all the social media that you're watching on at the moment in time. So we're live to you on all the social media channels. That's really lazy. We need to get better at that. We're live on all the social media channels that you're watching right now at this moment in time to come to you to help you to get the people in your business right. That's our focus. We're here to help you to create an environment that your staff want to belong to, but also makes your business productive, gives you value for money, and helps you to grow and meet the goals that you have in your business. Equally, if you are watching live and you can't watch us live for the whole hour that we may be on for, then please, that's absolutely fine. Go on to our podcast. You can download the podcast from wherever you get your podcast. Again, it's getting really lazy, right? So wherever you get your podcast, you can get access to the recording. So we're live, it's Thursday, and the recording goes out, of course, onto the podcast tomorrow. So go ahead, download that. It's the HR man, that's me, coming in and helping to go through these different bits and pieces. Woo! Deep breaths, because I feel there's a lot to go through right now, and this is a test for me as much as anything else, because obviously with this particular process, there are so many employment law changes that are likely to be coming up, may be coming up in the next year, that it's just astounding. I mean, normally every April, every October, we have a raft of different changes, like, you know, the national living wage would increase and the amount you can pay for maternity and sick pay and all these other bits and pieces, statutory stuff kind of goes up. There may be some other little tweaks and little things around the sides that you have to be aware of. And maybe in a year, you'll get one or two real biggies that will come out that you need to be aware of that make real massive changes. Well, this year is a bumper year for all of us in terms of the amount of changes that are coming up. And it really does, it's going to get this put up here, it really does make life good for the workers and staff. Obviously, they're there for a purpose, but it's really challenging for employers as well. You think about what we're going to be going through this year in 2023 with inflation, and all the other stuff. I mean, this is going to be a really challenging year for business, full stop. So to add these other bits and pieces in is just going to be eye-watering. And one of the key things for us is obviously one of our core values. You'll see it in the title, simplicity. This shit gets complicated. At the best of times, we're already in a complicated environment. This is just going to make it even worse. So what I want to do is just like a test for me as much as anything else. So I will be referring to different bits and pieces just as we go through to make sure that we're keeping on train, we're keeping accurate with some of these changes that are coming up that are going to be impacting on you. Of course, it goes without saying, as we go through, we'll be breaking these down in any case in separate videos afterwards. But this will also go out in our training platform. So for those of you that are our retained clients or on HR Lite, you'll get access to this to play back anyway, and to go through. But what I would say is, look, in the comments below, either in whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, it doesn't matter. Put in the comments below what you think about some of these changes. What are the big ones that are going to impact on you? Which are the big ones? If you're a member of staff, you're an employee or a worker, which ones are you looking forward to come in? Which ones do you think, shit, that wasn't in the first place? I can't believe that wasn't even there. Put them in the comments below. Let us know. Give us some feedback. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll be looking to share them as we go forward in terms of everything else that we're doing. So that'll be fantastic and massively helpful. Look, like I said, we are massively in terms of time under the cosh here. So I really want to move on to our next piece of business. So post-Brexit reform and the retained EU law bill. Just before we start going through this, there are going to be some complexities, and I'll come through them in a minute. But there are a raft, and not just in employment, but in general kind of law, that when we exited the EU were put in place for a period of time that had to then be reviewed. So we've got up until the 31st December this year, 2023, to review a series, a raft of different laws that if we don't ratify them and keep them into UK law, so we've got to expressly retain these. We've got to say we want to keep these laws in place, thank you very much, past that particular date. Otherwise, they cease to remain law within the UK. So just to put this into perspective, I want to go through three core areas. There's a raft of health and safety ones, I believe, that would potentially also be impacted by this. And by the way, guys, if we have anybody health and safety that wants to mention those, come on in, put them in the comments, add to the conversation. But there's a raft of changes that are going to happen. But one of the three areas that will really predominantly be impacted by this, believe this or not, is the working time regulations, 1998. So everything that sets out that obviously you've got the legal right to opt out of the 48-hour working week if you wanted to. That sets out how about rest periods, breaks, the weekends, and the 11 hours, and all those different bits and pieces about how you should work, the breaks between shifts that you should be taking, your right to be able to work less than 48 hours, which is written in there unless you opt out, the ability to opt out, all those different bits and pieces. We refer to these constantly when you're looking, especially at the shift workers. So shift workers, or if you're working in multiple places, you could easily be going over the 48-hour working week. And by the way, it's not as simple as going, oh, I've worked more than 48 hours this week. It's a case of it's worked out on an average of 17 weeks. So it's looking over the course of 17 weeks have you worked over the 48-hour week. All those things at the moment in time are in law. They've come across as we exited the EU. We need to expressly say we want to retain those. There could be changes that could come up to those as well. So it's something to be aware of. The other one is TUPE, the transfer of undertakings, the protections in place for when you move from one employer to another employer. And, this is the weird one for me because not everybody's heard of TUPE. And of course, we do quite a lot of TUPE. And it's quite commonplace. And, it's really, really fundamentally important because if you are moving from one employer to another, so for example, if one business is taking over another business and they're bringing those staff in, it's about your protections for you as an employee. It's about your own protections if you're contract employment, your kind of hours that you've been working, all those things would come across with you. It's protected under that process. And not just at the point of transferring, but potentially after that period of time too, because you can't make alterations and changes that ultimately come back to the actual transfer itself, unless it's under what's called specific terms, in which case you can, which is organizational, technical, or economic, so an OTE. So you can in those cases, but you have to be very specific. So there are huge protections for staff there that, do you know what, if something happens that's completely out of my control, at least I know that realistically for me, where I am right now today, there's not going to be this huge change. My pay's not going to change. The hours I work aren't going to change. I'm not going to go through this massive turmoil myself because of something that's completely not to do with me. So for you guys, that's a really important one. And I think that kind of gets understated and forgotten about because not many people outside of this world kind of understand and know that. Agency workers regulations as well is another one. So, in terms of things, we all know about employment rights and rights to staff and employees, but there are also rights to people that come to you who work at an agency or through an agency for a period of time, normally 12 weeks or more, and also to those that are workers. What's a worker? We're thinking about people that are 0-hour workers. So we talk about bank staff. So if you have a bank pool, so we work quite a lot with our clients, they all get a raft of rights. So eventually things like annual leave. Yes, those people that work 0 hours, they get annual leave. Yeah, just bear that in mind. That's one that commonly gets forgotten. What? But all those regulations that have been put in place, they will all potentially just drift away. So we need to watch this space. What's going to happen? Something's got to happen between now and the 31st of December. And it's likely that, there could be a raft of changes that could come in on the back of this. Of course, it gives an opportunity to be able to put in place these tweaks and edits around the sides on these laws. Some of them may just stay the same, be transferred across, but it's an area we must keep a firm eye on. So, next, oh my God, flexible working rights. So I'm just conscious of time here as well, everyone. So I want to make sure we're remaining on point, but I don't want to do that at the cost of obviously going through some of the important things we need to remember here. So flexible working rights. Flexible working rights obviously have been in place in one guise or another for quite a long period of time. And the tweaks and changes that have normally happened has been around who has the right to be able to apply for flexible working. So it used to be people that were carers, or obviously if you were pregnant, go through maternity leave and stuff along those sort of lines. Then that changed to everybody had the right to be able to request. And now what they're doing is they're changing the time frame. So previously, right now, you have to go through a process of working with an employer for 26 weeks, 6 months, that you have to be an employer continuously with before you can actually put in a claim for flexible working. And just to put that into perspective, that's someone formally coming forward and making a request to alter, say, for example, to go to 4 long days, condensed hours. There's an example, right? So you could put that forward, but you'd have to have worked with that employer for 26 weeks before you could. One of the things that this is proposing to change is that it's looking to put that in place from day one. So from the very point an employee comes and starts working with you, they have the ability to request formally the right to work flexibly. One of the common themes that you'll tend to find around that will be, working from home. So that's going to be a common one that's going to come proper. So in terms of that, the other key thing that's going to change there potentially is at the moment in time, you can only request to work, a formal flexible working request once in every 12 months. The key difference with this is that would increase to twice every 12 months, every 2 months, every 12 months. So just to recap on that, you can request flexible working from day one. This hasn't come into law yet, by the way. These are things that could potentially be coming in this year. So just to caveat that, I've got another point to make on that before I forget as well. So you can make that request potentially from day one, and you'll be able to make more than one request. You'll be able to make 2 requests in any 12-month period. So some quite significant changes there in terms of those different bits and pieces. And in terms of that, there are going to be some other tweaks. Just conscious of time, my God. So there are going to be some other tweaks around the edges in terms of that, in terms of obviously the formality to be able to respond. It's going to reduce from 3 months to 2 months in terms of those different bits when people put forward those flexible working rights, requests to work flexibly. And the other thing I just want to touch on here is the difference between employment bills that the government are raising and bringing in and bills that are potentially private members' bills. So a private members' bill could be someone from the opposition or the House of Lords that could bring something forward. And if it's supported by the government, it's likely to be put through. So this isn't something on their natural agenda under the King's speech. I'm getting there. Under the King's speech that come into force, these are private members' bills. And flexible working is potentially one of those that we're talking about at the moment in time. But if that comes into place, that's something that for employers, we need to be really aware of, precisely because of one of the reasons that we all know about right now, which is a request to work from home. That's the most common one and theme that's going to come forward. By the way, with all of these things, the law is not sexy. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to jazz this shit up. It's hard to make this like, yeah, employment law, woo, let's go. No one in their right mind is reading this with any great enthusiasm in their minds whatsoever. It's just part of the world that we live in that we have to know it, right? So this is really, really hard to kind of make sexy, but it is really important. So if you are watching live, please bear with me as we work our way through. There will be other ones that might be really personal to you that we'll be bringing up. Okay. So sexual harassment, worker protections. So with this is kind of a throwback. So previously, what used to happen is if sexual harassment was potentially happening in the workplace, the employer, you, were also liable for what was taking place and happening. That meant that if a person within your team, a member of your team, was potentially sexually harassing someone else, and you weren't taking the prerequisite steps to try and help to avoid that, to stop that, to put an end to it, to do the things you have to do as an employer to protect your staff, you would have been liable as an employer. For whatever reason, that changed, and it's now coming back. So what this means is that there is absolutely an onus of responsibility upon you as employers to protect, a duty to protect and prevent sexual harassment in your workplace. And that, by the way, does not just mean that you're protecting your staff from other staff. This means that if you're a hotel, you're protecting your staff from guests, clients. You're protecting them from any third party, not just other people within your organization. You have a responsibility. You have an onus and duty of care to be able to look after your staff and make sure that you're providing an environment to work in that is free from sexual harassment. And to be honest with you, personally, yeah, why wouldn't you have the right to work in an environment where you're not going to be sexually harassed? So I think that's obviously going to be a big key one. The thing that could potentially, I can see that could come out from this, and just looking at some of the commentary around this area as well, is that the potential for the victim mentality to come into play. That it's an easy one to kind of claim and to say that obviously addressed when complaints weren't being dealt with. So employers need to be hot on this, and the problem is obviously if they are not, and it does go to tribunal, then obviously it's going to have increased costs, potentially up to 25% on those particular areas that would come into force. So it's just one of those things. Do you know what? I just think at the end of the day, some of these should be easier said than done. Easier done than said. I don't know. But they should be quite simple to put forward. And I think everyone has the right to be able to come and work in an environment they want to feel a part of, that they want to belong to. And if you're being sexually harassed in the workplace, you're not going to want to be there. So, it's going to be counterproductive in any case not to address it for you and your business. So this one, it just makes logical sense to me, to be honest with you. Protections from redundancy. So this is the Pregnancy and Family Leave Bill. So the key thing around this is just to make it clear, this is not saying that you cannot make somebody who is pregnant redundant. By the way, I just realized how that sounded. I'm not saying we have to make people who are pregnant redundant, by the way. But when you're going through a redundancy process, you may be, looking at quite a large number of staff. And, quite a lot of our clients, they range. You can have redundancies that look at just 1, 2 staff to redundancies that look at 500 staff and things that are in between. So it does really depend. But the whole point from this is it's not a protection that says you can't make individuals redundant. Obviously, this is a business-led scenario. So what is needed within your business, not telling you who you have to keep and retain your business. But the whole onus of this is to provide additional protections, which I think probably, if it came into force, would be up to 6 months. That after the point, of during pregnancy, maternity, on the way back, adoption leave as well, that you have protections for 6 months, whereby you have the priority status in terms of being posted into suitable alternative posts, being redeployed into other alternative posts. That means that those individuals that fall into that category shoot to the top of the list, above and beyond everybody else that they should naturally slot into those. So just as a case point, an example, if I have 5 people, then we're going through a redundancy process, and one of those people is actually coming back from maternity. And when we're looking at this, we have one vacancy that would be a natural slotting in for those people in that post. When I say naturally slotting in, 50% or more similar to the role that they're in at the moment in time would have slotting rights to that. Normally, what you would say, if you take the pregnant person out of that situation entirely, is it'll be a selection process you'd have to go through. With this, what you'd be saying is that one person has more priority status than the other 4 to naturally slot into that role. So they would naturally go into that first, meaning you'd be left with the other 4 people still at risk of redundancy. So these are the protections that are going to come into place to help and support these particular group of people in this way. Again, in the realm of things, it's one of those practicalities that you hope not to come up against. Nobody goes into business looking to make redundancies. This is not what you want to be doing. And I always say this to everybody who do redundancies at the moment in time. But at the moment, redundancy processes are the worst processes to be involved in. It's the part of the job that we do that I hate the most, because it's just shit, to be honest with you. It's horrible. But it's part of business, and it's part of life, and it's part of what you have to come against as you're trying to help protect businesses to move forward, maybe to restructure, to change, alter course, and ultimately then to grow and be sustainable thereafter. But they're not the things you want to be doing. So it's important to know. And if you are going to be going through these processes, if you are going to be going through these processes, and you've got individuals that are obviously coming back from maternity, adoption leave, parental leave, shared care leave, then you need to be aware of these particular ramifications as you're going through that, to make sure that we are looking after and protecting those individuals and treating them as we legally should be. Otherwise, that's a huge claim that could potentially come forward. So, carers leave, yay! Carers leave for me is going to be quite similar in a lot of ways to parental leave. And this is going to be for those individuals that are caring for dependents on a long-term basis as well. So not just the short-term kind of caring, but on a long-term basis. All of those things need to be defined, by the way. So what is long-term and what qualifies as a dependent, and those sorts of things need to be kind of scoped out. But this is looking at giving people that are caring for individuals that are dependents over a long-term basis 5 days per year of carers leave. That's leave to help and support, obviously, the person they're looking after. And it's likely that this process is going to be probably unpaid. And that's why I'm saying it's very similar to me, in my mind, the way I think about it, not always logical, is going to be quite similar to like parental leave, which is also equally unpaid. So it's one of those things, again, it's coming up more and more. A lot more of us are in our personal lives caring for other individuals as we get older. The older we get, we're living for longer. And obviously, the more issues and health concerns relatives do come up with, or potentially you have members in your team that are caring for elderly relatives, but also maybe caring for other dependents, children, and so on and so forth. So rambling there for a minute, Jesus. So in that sense of things, this is going to be another one of those that could come in. That, to be honest with you, is it going to make a lightning make or break difference to your business right now? No, probably not. But it's something to be aware of. And that's the important thing here, to be honest with you. The other one, getting a bit of a nasal thing going on there. The other one, so neonatal care. Neonatal care is the next one really to go through. This is the leave and pay bill. So this one is quite interesting again, because like I just said, with one of our other clients, it's kind of one of those things you think, what? I thought that was already there. And they weren't really realizing it actually may not well be. So neonatal care is there to help and support parents, obviously, who have newborn children that are in neonatal units and being cared for through that process. This bill will provide parents with the right to neonatal care for at least a period of 1 week, up to a maximum of 12 weeks of paid leave, regardless of their length of service. So there is no qualifying service that's required for this particular process. With a minimum of at least 26 weeks of continuous service will be able to receive neonatal care pay at a prescribed statutory rate. So obviously that means that the statutory rate would be applied. Not necessarily, you can always increase it. You can always do more. The statutory is always put in place as the bare minimum. It's the floor, or in some case, there's redundancies. It could be the ceiling that you would apply. But obviously, this is there to give those individuals that are unfortunately going through that particular process with paid leave from 1 week up to a maximum of 12 weeks. And obviously, those with the qualifying period of 26 weeks continuous service will be able to receive the pay that's prescribed in the statutory process. You can always pay more than that if you wanted to do so. So that's an important change. I think, obviously, again, you'd be hard pressed with some of these, by the way, to come back and say, I don't think that's right. It's hard for businesses if you have individuals that are out of your business for any period of time, for any reason, sickness, absence, oh God, I'm dying. Sickness, absence, any of those different bits and pieces. Of course, they have huge impacts upon you, but it's hard pressed not to say that individuals and your staff that are going through those processes shouldn't have that ream of support put in place. I think that'd be quite hard not to agree to that. And these, by the way, that we're talking about right now. So I would say the redundancy one, the carers leave, neonatal leave, and the next one as well. These are all really what I would say family leave and pay policies that will be coming in into place to help and support families. And we always talk about this with the PPF. And again, I coined this, it's not mine. Brandon, oh my God, I've had a brain fart, I can't remember. Brandon Dawson, Jesus, there we go. So Brandon Dawson, he coins that phrase of the PPF, the personal, professional, financial, but it absolutely applies. And we use that really through everything we do, all of our training programs. And this is really around that personal element that's helping supporting your staff, which is really, really fundamentally important. And then that obviously that brings us on to the miscarriage, the miscarriage leave bill and the fertility treatment bill. So again, just really quickly on this one, this is going to come and give paid legal right to pay time off for those that unfortunately have a miscarriage, so a form of bereavement leave, and for those families that are looking to go through fertility treatment to have some paid time off in respect of both of those. And again, as with the others, I think you'd be hard pushed. I'm more than happy to hear in the comments those that have different perspectives and points of view on that. As we always say, this is an opinion. It is not a monopoly of it. So let me know if you feel any different. But I think, again, when you come back to the personal side to this is important. If you don't take care of these bits and pieces, it's going to come back and hurt you in your business anyway. So it's just being a bit short-sighted if you don't look at that. So moving on. So has anyone heard of this one recently? Anyone? So the trade union reform bill, anyone heard of that at all? So this is putting in place the the minimum levels of service in particular key areas. I believe it's also increasing the threshold on ballots from 40% to 50% for trade unions in those areas before they go on strike. What this means is that if you are unable to guarantee the minimum level of service, that the employers in these cases would have the ability to say no to individuals going on strike. That's the earth-shattering element here, and this is why potentially you might hear the. I don't buy into this. Again, this is not a political channel. I always get really nervous when we talk about things like this because it crosses over so much into that kind of world of things. And I just don't give a crap. I don't want to know about it. But in that sense of things, it does raise obviously the question of what happens to people's jobs, and obviously if obviously they refuse to come into work and want to stay on strike, that potentially they are at risk then of being dismissed. So that's why you get the kind of the claims of it's dismissing nurses kind of a bill, whatever they call it. It's setting in place minimum standards, minimum levels. Whether you agree with that, whether you don't agree with that, I think unlike the other ones that we've just been through, this one will probably be the most contentious one. It's one that's mostly publicised, and you would say normally in the normal run of things wouldn't have as much of an impact. But in the terms of where we are at the moment, where it feels like you're having a strike for every day of the week, for every week of the month, and every month of the year, it seems really relevant right now in terms of those different things. And I know there's a multitude of different viewpoints on that, and I'm not getting onto that whatsoever. But we know quite a lot about that that's going to be looking to come into force. The other key difference around this one is this is not a public members bill, a private members bill. What am I talking about? This is a government bill that they're looking to bring in. So this one is most likely, barring any obviously shenanigans in House of Lords and other bits and pieces, going to come into force. So that's one thing that we know is probably going to happen. Again, I know that there's a lot of talk about what happens in terms of trying to stay out of politics, but if there is another government in place after this one, and it's a Labour government, they've promised to repeal this. So this is coming in now. If there is a Labour government, it could go tomorrow. So it's a case of wait and see on that one, but I think it's pretty certain that's going to be coming into place. The next one is pay rises. Woo! So we go from strikes to pay rises. Who would have thought that would have happened? I wish I would have planned that out better. But anyway, so maybe I did it just by accident in a really good way. So nearly 10% increase on the national living wage. So national living wage is going to be going up in April 2023, normally the 6th of April. That will go up to £10, and I'm trying to remember now. It's on the screen. Sorry, £10.42. Whoa, how bad can you get? It's right there, Mike. It's on your screen. £10.42. That's going to be going up to. Oh my god! Along with increases in other statutory entitlements, so things like sick pay going up to £109 and something pence. This is bad. Come on, Mike. 40 pence, £109 and 40 pence. Voice in the background. £109 and 40 pence. That's going up to, and obviously the other statutory rights such as maternity pay, etc., will also be going up in their values. I think up to £172 and 48 pence. There we go. So £172 and 48 pence. That's going to be going up to. This is the problem with lives, right? This is the test. When you get these little figures, so if I remember these numbers, I know full well that I'm going to forget my PIN. And then I'm screwed when the tappy happy doesn't work, right? So it's really careful and difficult on this. But when you go live, you can't stop, pause, and edit. So, kind of a moment. So those elements are going to be going up. So I think that's obviously in comparison to other years, it doesn't feel like a lot when you look at the rate of pay. When you break that down to an hourly rate, it's pennies in the pound is what's going up. But when you put it out there, that actually it's a nearly 10% increase. That's obviously something to cater to as much of an extent as it can. Again, not political, damn it. Obviously, inflation. So that's the other thing that's going to be coming up in April. So that's something we know is going to be happening. Oh, and then this one. So this one is a personal angst of my own, really. The fire and rehire. Obviously, it's been abused and misused, and it's been publicised when it's been really badly abused. So, for example, P&O Ferry, not to be confused with the cruise company, but with those ferries where they fired their employees, rehired all these cheaper staff on these different rates of pay that were lower than our national living wages and everything else, because they were being hired in another jurisdiction to England and Wales, and Scotland, and all those different things. So they're using these loopholes to get around that. And that left a real bad taste in individuals' mouths, including my own. But I also think, there's been a multitude. I'm trying to remember now. I think it was a tech company in America where they just went on live and the CEO basically bleated on about how he hated doing it and how badly it went last time. But by the way, you're all redundant. It's those kind of things you hear stories about, which are really crap. Because we'll do this in a separate show, but when you're going through these processes, such as redundancy or fire and rehire and change people's terms and conditions, this is really stressful shit for people who are in work. And you can't underestimate that. And you've got to do what you've got to do for your business. Of course you do. That's our focus as well. But you've got to give people some rights and dignity as they're going through this. I mean, it's just a way and a means of just dealing with people and just not being a complete shit. So I think, and by the way, again, if you haven't seen me before, I do swear a little bit. So apologies in the first instance, because I know we're on all sorts of different platforms and some are more okay with it than others, but I can't change who I am. So anyway, so fire rehire. This is going to be based on an ACAS code of conduct that was meant to come out last year. Didn't materialize. So one of those promises that didn't come through. So overpromise and significantly underdeliver. We're expecting that should come out sometime this year. They're saying early 2023. For me, that'll be within the first 6 months of 2023, but hopefully in the first 3. Those of you that know otherwise, please put in the comments and let us know. This code of practice is it's going to be treated in the same way as the other codes of practice around things such as like dismissals and the rights to have investigations and all those different bits and pieces. It's important to know that these codes of practice are not law in their own right and in entirety. But if you don't apply them and abide by them, then they will have an impact on you when you go through a litigious process, like a tribunal. So in these particular cases, if you are not obviously following that code of conduct in terms of the process to a fair, rightful, and involved consultation process, then you're probably going to be liable, to a 25% increase in your tribunal fees or fines that you're going to receive. So it's just going to make your whole situation a lot more expensive. If you're doing this on a wide scale for a large number of staff and you get groups coming together through a tribunal process, that can actually add up to be quite an expensive situation. Again, I mean, when these things come out, as we always do, and other HR practitioners alike, we will follow to the letter those codes of conduct because we know everything's about reducing risk for business. There's never a risk-free option. There's never a zero risk option, but you always want to reduce that level of risk for businesses. So it would be bonkers to go in there and not abide by those codes of conduct because you know that whatever happens, potentially there's going to be a fine at the end of that. So you're not really advising people in the right way. So if you are doing this yourself and you're looking after yourselves, then it's important to know that that is there. It's important to know that you should follow it. And just because the ACAS code is not an employment law bill that says you must do X, Y, and Z, you still have to follow it. So treat it in exactly the same vein. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be coming up this year. As you can see, we've touched on what I think are the biggest ones for people to know about within our area. And there will be more that will come out as well. And as they do, obviously, we're going to be coming on and doing other lives around those too. So there will be more information that will filter out from these in due course. Like I said, there is a large swathe of these that are private members' bills. Normally, you wouldn't mention in this particular way, except for the fact that a lot of these seem to be having the government support on. And that makes that quite relevant because it means they're more likely to come into force. So that's why we have to pay a lot more attention to these. Again, you may be able to pick out in there, some of these are going to be more important to you than others right now. So for example, some of them, I always use the maternity policy as a great analogy because until either you and your partner are pregnant and expecting a child, or you're an employer employing an individual who's going to be expecting a child, you don't really pay too much attention to a maternity policy. And it's not until that time that you read it in a lot of due diligence around what you have to do, right? and go out and get that guidance. This is going to be the same around some of these areas as well. So until you have a person that's requesting carers leave, until you have individuals that unfortunately have to use neonatal care leave, until, again, doubly more unfortunately, you have individuals that have to use leave for a miscarriage, or potentially they're looking to go through fertility treatment, it's unlikely these ones are going to be the top of your list. Okay, so that's one thing to expect. We need to know they're there. The ones that I think could be more pertinent to individuals is going to be the ones around flexible working rights. I think that's going to be a big one because at the moment in time, on the back of COVID, and one of the biggest complications we're seeing all around is getting people back into a workplace, and the amount of requests for people to want to work from home. And to be honest with you, employers are also equally, it's difficult because there is a situation where you can have a hybrid situation because it does work from home. We've proven that through COVID, but we still do need some kind of presence on site as well. And trying to get people back into the workplace, I think a lot of that is going to come through in terms of the flexible working rights, especially you're going to have it from day one. And you can request it now twice in 1 year. So I think those are things that are definitely going to be featuring high on most of your lists to try and keep an eye open for. I think the other one to keep in the back of your mind is the sexual harassment work protections. I think that one's going to be quite a key one as well, mainly because, I think there's a possibility there that people can fall through the crack. I think there's a possibility that employers will not know about it, and ignorance, whilst it may be bliss, is not a reasonable, justifiable legal excuse. So there is still the requirement for you to do that and look after your staff. And as I said, with the vast majority of these, I think it's hard pressed to argue that it shouldn't be in place. Some individuals have thought these things are already in place. Sexual harassment, by the way, is another classic case and example of that, partially because it's already been in place in the past and it's just come back and it's a rehash of history. But these things, you'd be hard pressed to say shouldn't be there because they're supportive for your staff. And the important thing about that is, well, do you know what? You've got to look after your staff. You must look after your staff in your workplace. It's in your interest as an employer to do that, because the better environments you create, the more you look after the first P in the PPF, the personal side of things, the more you're going to get back from people potentially as you're working your way through that. Individuals are really complex. And it's not, I always say, it's not like you just bought a new printer and you plugged it in for the first time. I use that excuse all the time, by the way, until I bought a new printer. And it's bloody difficult and complex trying to get that shit sorted out. Anyway, it's not like plugging in a new printer. We have different personalities, different desires, different concerns, different viewpoints, different perspectives, and different things, make us want to respond in different ways. So it's not a one size fits all with people. So you've got to bear that in mind. But I think generally a lot of these things that potentially could come into force are going to be more beneficial on that personal side, which will equally be beneficial for you as an employer to take on board. And by the way, some of those flexible working things, I know I've spoken to a couple of our clients last week, and the voice is going. Spoke to a couple of our clients last week. They're already putting into place steps around this without even knowledge of this. Just personally for their own business, that's what they wanted to do. So the fact they're already moving in that direction is great. It's groovy. And it means things are great for them. Others, we're probably going to have to go through and to make some tweaks and changes to policies and procedures if that comes in. And obviously looking at doing further training around that as well, which of course we'll bring out on a live session too. So thank you everyone. If you've come in, you're taking your lunchtime, you stayed the whole length of this, then kudos to you. Extra points and stars. There's nothing here to give away in terms of points and prizes, but congratulations is all I can do. It's all I can give. If you stayed here till the end, I really, really appreciate you. I really appreciate your time. And if you're putting comments in the boxes below, we will get round to those. And thank you so much for those as well. I hope you have a great weekend to the rest of the week when this goes. So anyway, we're going to leave you there. I think it's been quite a whistle-stop tour. what we will be doing separately away from this platform is looking at going into all of these in a lot more depth and detail. If that's something that you want to have on the live stream or for us to put up, then please let me know. For those of you that are watching and you're already with us, we get that happen. Don't worry, you will have access to those automatically. So you'll get them anyway. So this is a whistle-stop tour of things to look at, things to bear in mind. Also, by the way, before I go, another great question I want to know. Is there anything you feel should be coming in 2023 that's not? What in this list that we've got here have we not touched upon that you think would make perfect logical sense to come into place, but isn't just yet? That's a great question. I'm glad that's just come to me like that. It's inspirational. Boom, there. What law should be putting in place that isn't being put in place right now? Come back and let us know. By the way, on that question, caveat, don't say about the trade union reform bill and repealing that and taking it out. I know that's a highly political thing. Excluding that, Jesus, I can just see that coming back. Anyway, have a great time. Thank you very much.